Hello and welcome to the Physical Preparation Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Robertson, and I'll be joined on the line later today by the one, the only, Dave Tenney. Now, before we jump into this week's show, I want to give you a quick recap of the week that was and just give you some insights as to what is going on in my neck of the woods. So it seems fitting, considering I've got a soccer guy on this week's show, that we start by talking about soccer, because Cade is in the midst of wrapping his season up. He's got one more game this weekend, and then he will be done. But Kendall's season actually wrapped up last weekend, and this was for Kendall and a lot of the girls on her team, their first tournament play experience. So it's one thing to go out and, just have a game and you win or lose. There's no real consequences to it. So this weekend, first big tournament experience, and basically the way the bracket works, you have two games and then the best two teams from your bracket play in the championship for, like bragging rights, winners' rights, whatever the case may be. So if you're unfamiliar with soccer, the way they do it is if you're in a pool, you are ranked first and foremost by your win-loss. All right. So obviously, if you win every game, you're doing pretty well. But a second way they have to delineate who is doing better is what's called goal differential. So primary focus here is you want to score as many goals as you can, give up as few goals as possible, so that ultimately your goal differential is very good as well. So this is important to note because we play our first game Friday night, and we actually play a team that we played the week previous. And we beat this team 4-1. I would say it wasn't as close. In some respects, we probably could have banged more goals, but in other respects, it probably could have been a lot closer because they had a lot of chances, a lot of opportunities they didn't capitalize on. But anyway, we're feeling pretty good about ourselves going into this game Friday. But what I tried to stress to our girls going into the game was, hey, look, that was last week. Like, we've got to bring the juice. Like, this is, for as big as a U10 soccer tournament can be, this is the end of our season. We want to play well. And so the night really started off rough right off the bat. That team had a lot of energy. Their fans were really into the game. And right away, 3-4 minutes in the game, we give up a PK and they knock it in. So right off the bat, we're down 1-0. We kind of grind out the rest of the first half, but we had no energy, just no juice at all. The other team is sprinting to every ball. We're trotting to every ball. They are not only sprinting to the ball, but they're actively trying to move it downfield. We kind of trot and then we just kind of chase them around. So I told the girls, look, we can get in this game. We didn't have great energy. We're only down 1-0. We're in a good spot. And needless to say, it didn't turn around the way we would have liked. We gave up 4 goals in the second half. So not only do we take a loss, but we have a -5 goal differential after the first game. So I had this whole kind of I don't want to say it was definitely not a pep talk, but I definitely had kind of what I wanted to say to the girls in my head after the game. And I just want to let them know, hey, look, sometimes in sports, if you don't give your best effort, you get your butt kicked. And that happened tonight. So I have this thought in my head, and this is the speech I'm going to give, and they come over, and half the team is in tears. So quick audible on the pep talk, and I just let them know, hey, look, sometimes we don't play our best. Sometimes we don't always take advantage of opportunities that we had. I said, but luckily for us, our season doesn't end tonight. We get at least one more game. I told him, hey, look, you got to put this one behind you. Okay, we can't change this. We can't go back and get a do-over. Let's come out tomorrow and let's have a great game. So fast forward to Saturday morning, girls come out, a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, and we literally bang 6 goals, give up no goals. So, huge win. Everybody smiles. We have a small chance to make it into that championship game in our bracket. Ultimately didn't work out for us. But, at the end of the day, it was a great way to end our season. The girls had an amazing game. Everybody played really, really well, top to bottom. Had a lot of girls that scored goals. We had other girls that played amazingly well on defense. So it was a really good way to finish our season up. And for me, I feel like it was a good way to wrap my season up as a coach. Was it exactly what we wanted? No. We would have loved to have been in that championship game, but it was still fun. Definitely a learning experience. And I think all of the girls not only improved hugely, but I was just so proud of them for their effort because they could have mailed it in. After Friday night, they could have came out, just rolled over again, had another really awful game, they came out, made a great effort, and it really showed in the results. So soccer is a wrap. Saturday night, Kendall got to go to a friend's house. She had a birthday party, sleepover, all that jazz. So we had Cade, which was awesome because we went to our favorite burger spot here in town called Brew Burger. If you're ever in Indy, you got to check it out. It's amazing. But had burgers. We came home. He got to pick the movie, which he loves because normally he has to negotiate and cajole Kendall to kind of maybe get the movie that he wants. So he got the movie that he wanted. So we watched Sonic the Hedgehog. If you haven't seen it and you've got kids, not a bad watch. I've definitely seen worse. And then Sunday, it's been really fun because Cade has been into going to the gym. He's got his own little Spotify playlist, which, you know, if you don't have kids or you didn't grow up in the 80s and play old Nintendo games, you probably wouldn't appreciate it, but it is all over the board. So he loves to play his music. We kick the soccer ball around, we get buckets, we throw the Frisbee. So it's been a lot of fun having him in the gym and just enjoying that time with him. So that is it for the weekend. Big week for Team Robertson because this is our first full week of school in almost 6.5 months. Kids did the first month virtual. They did the second half of the month 50-50, or the second month of school 50-50, and now they're back 5 days a week. So this is the first full Monday I've had to just train clients, get work done in a very, very long time. It feels good. I'm trying not to overbook myself because I have tons of people that are asking, oh, will you come on my podcast? Or, you know, can we do this? And I'm trying to just like push all that aside for a little while so that I have time to catch up. There's things I want to do for RTS. There's content I want to create. There's things I need to do for iFast to get it back where it needs to be. So just looking forward to some semblance of normalcy. And then last but not least, I feel like it would be remiss if I didn't say this, but crazy to think about. Our big man, Mr. Cade, turned 7 this week. And anybody that has kids knows like those moments are just like etched in your brain forever. And while we get older and our birthdays maybe don't carry as much weight as they used to, unless they're followed by a 0, anytime your child has a birthday, it's just like this very reflective moment. So it's just been amazing to watch this guy grow up. He's such a bright young guy, so curious, so much energy. I mean, I wish I could just capture and bottle his energy. I'm sure maybe at one point in my life I had it like he does, but just so proud of him. He's such an awesome young guy and just really, really blessed to have him in my life. So, okay, I think that does it. Hopefully I didn't ramble on too long. We're going to take a quick break and then we're going to jump into this awesome new episode with my guy, Dave Tenney. Hey, my friend, let's take a moment and talk about online coaching. Not a day goes by where I don't get an email, direct message on social, or a random comment on my website from someone who wants to get into great shape but doesn't know where to start. And look, I get it because I've been there too. But if there's one distinct pattern in my life with regards to training, it's this. When I have a coach, I always get better results than when I'm trying to figure it out on my own. If you're struggling to get into great shape, or have issues you need to work around, or maybe just need some accountability from someone you can trust, then maybe it's time to consider online coaching with your boy MR. I've been working with online clients for the past 14 years, and while many people assume I only train athletes, the vast majority of my online clients are actually fellow trainers, coaches, and fitness professionals. So if you're interested in starting up or learning more, please send an email to mike@robertsontrainingsystems.com with the words online coaching in the subject line. From there, I'll send you an email and detail exactly how the entire process works. However, I can tell you this much. While I've had great success with my online coaching up to this point, since I've started using Train Heroic with all of my clients and athletes, I'm getting even better results with my clients than ever before. So again, if you're interested in learning more, just drop me a line at mike@robertsontrainingsystems.com and I'll give you all the details on how it works. Thanks so much, and I hope to work with you soon. Dave Tenney is the High Performance Director for the MLS expansion franchise Austin FC. Prior to getting started there, he was recently a High Performance Director for both the Orlando Magic in the NBA and the Seattle Sounders of the MLS. In this show, Dave and I discuss a ton of different topics. We start by talking about his role in the NBA and what prompted him to move from soccer to basketball. Then we talk about what his job actually looked like on a day-to-day basis and the big differences he noticed between the sports of soccer and basketball. Finally, we discuss the reasons he finally opted to get back into football, aka soccer, and what his goals are for both himself and the club in 2021. This is an awesome episode. Dave is a super sharp guy, and I know you're going to love it. But enough for me. Let's do this. Dave, man, thanks so much for coming on the show here today. Super excited to have you back. It's obviously been a hot minute since we've had you on, so what's new in your neck of the woods, man?
Plenty. First, I'd like to say it's an honor to be one of the few third-time on guests. I'm not sure how many of those you've had, but how many have you had of those? Do you know?
Less than 5.
Nice.
Less than 5.
It's an honor to be in that group because I'm sure they're all really good people. But yeah, I mean, I've obviously just made a big transition. Left the NBA bubble in August and recently changed jobs and moved to Austin, changed sports as well. So there's been plenty going on.
Yeah. So let's just dive in because there's a lot going on, obviously, like you said, and there's a lot that I want to cover with you. So let's start very broad and general to begin with. Talk to me just about the past 3 years. And let's just start with this. What was your primary role or roles during your time in the NBA?
Yeah, so my primary role and title was high performance director, which is what I've learned and part of my experience the last 3 years. I think every sport interprets the role of the high performance director differently. And obviously the NBA, based on the economics of the sport, the economics of the hierarchy infrastructures, looks significantly different than, let's say, for an MLS team.
Yeah.
So essentially the role of, I would say there's 2 different roles of high performance directors with the NBA, and you kind of have either your hands-on performance director versus your hands-off performance director. And a lot of your hands-on performance directors tend to be physical therapists that still kind of treat some of the athletes that come through, that still may be assigned to one of the 2 of the superstars in the team.
Yep.
And then you also have a group of your hands-off performance directors, of which I was one, where it's very much, I'd say, almost a middle management position that reports directly to a president that has current now staffs of upwards of 12 people just for your NBA team, not even looking at your G League team.
Right.
That also does contracts with a slew of consultants and contractors. A lot of the role I found as I came in was really trying to cultivate good relationships with agents, have a stable of doctors outside of your own team doctor that you can draw from for different injuries, manage information with your media people all the time as different injuries happen and pop up and things like that. So again, in talking to, I just had a fantastic president with Orlando and Jeff Weltman, came from the Toronto Raptors. And he would describe my position as very much as a strategic position. He felt that the high performance director position in the NBA was a strategic position that helped kind of high level decision making and managing relationships, managing budgets, managing a group of kind of highly specialized staff members. So that was obviously different than some of the other models and the roles of high performance directors within different teams and different sports.
Yeah, for sure. So let's rewind and kind of talk about that because what does the day-to-day look like for you? So it could be a game day, practice day, whatever, a bubble day when you were in the bubble. What does a day look like for you if you're not actually practicing?
I mean, I think if you think of most NBA staffs right now, I mean, you have a high performance director, you may have 3 to 4 physical therapists, you may have 2 athletic trainers, 2 strength coaches, a chef dietitian, massage therapist, sports scientist. You have so many different pieces of the puzzle that really have to work together on a daily basis. And,
right.
And it is a interdisciplinary collaborative model if it works effectively. And so a lot of it was just really making sure in the morning everyone is on the same page, and the passing on from, let's say, from physical therapy to strength coach or not passing on and making those decisions. The decision of what we're going to collect from a sports science standpoint daily, just really so much of these roles. And as high performance departments are becoming bigger, I mean, you really find a lot of the challenges are on sharing of information and the sharing of decision making. So really facilitating that whole process. It is not, the high performance model of the NBA is not, let's say a physical therapist coming in and deciding what he or she is going to do with that athlete in the day and not having to really let anyone know that, and just doing his or her thing. Like that's not how high performance departments operate, in high level sport anymore. It is getting in, giving the group an update of an athlete, giving the group an update of what your plans might be with that athlete, connecting with the strength coach and what the strength coach might want to do, maybe from a conditioning standpoint, deciding, part of my role was to provide information to the head coach, to the president, but especially to the head coach in terms of who, practice status for each individual and who might be in, who might be out, what the session might be. So, if you had 3 to 4 people that were beat up, the different therapists would come in and state kind of where all the different athletes were at, and that might necessitate a talk with the head coach if certain critical mass of athletes were beat up, and just again it's that sharing of information. It's making the decisions of what each individual in the whole group needs to do, and then it's passing on that information to everyone outside of that high performance group, and that could be president, GM, medical, or media people, coaching staff, etc.
I gotcha. So one final question on this, because this is fascinating to me. And I think you had talked about this before, and I feel like Garrison Draper, when he was on, had talked about this. But how does this actually go down, right? How does this sharing of information go down? Is it in a formal sense, like, hey, before the team has practice, we're going to have like a staff meeting, and then we have practice, and then we have a debrief afterwards? Or like, how does that actually come together?
I think you have to have, and this is where I think where your AMS platform comes in as well. I think you have to have a living, breathing AMS platform where as someone makes a note or an observation about an athlete, like, oh, I need the group to know that. And that's typically, that could be a Slack, it could be a Microsoft Teams, it could be, any AMS type platform that has some sort of communication tool.
Yep.
And then there is the morning meetings as well. So
I gotcha.
There literally is, like, you cannot share too much information amongst your staff. And then that's another reason I think why the ability to not hold on to things and to share information and to be collaborative is a really key critical trait of people that want to thrive in a high performance environment, whether that's as a physical therapist or as a strength coach or sports scientist. It's this kind of constant sharing of what's going on across different platforms, and that could be doing a rehab session, sharing what an athlete did in a rehab session the day before, how they responded, how they felt, and then that proceeds, is followed by a discussion the next morning in terms of, okay, this is what the athlete did yesterday. This is how they responded. These are my plans today. What's everyone's thoughts? And and part of my role again is like to facilitate that decision amongst that whole staff.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's go back just a little bit, because you went from the MLS to the NBA, and now you're back in the MLS. So I'm interested, what prompted your move from soccer, where you were obviously incredibly successful, and prompted you to try your hand in professional basketball?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know if there's not a singular answer. I think there's also, kind of, it's where you are in your career, it's where you are in your life, it's where you are within, an organization. Mm-hmm. I think it's funny, I was thinking about this question, and then I kind of thought of, I always recommend, there's a YouTube video, Tony Stridwick, from who was at Manchester United for many years within soccer, extremely bright, one of the first kind of big performance director, type practitioners in English Premier League soccer. And he has given this talk across many platforms and kind of, winning moments in high performance environment. And I think he talks about the life cycle of, high performance environments. And, and he's one of the only ones I think that's brought it up in our setting. Although I think across, kind of different domains, people will talk about like a 7-year life cycle within organizations, right? And about every 7 years, if you start kind of this department, this team, this concept, most things seem to have a max life cycle of about 7 years, and then and then something else has to grow from that.
Right. And
I think he related his time at Manchester United to this, seeing this life cycle over 7 years, and and then I think people maybe it's not. I think it's human nature, not that people buy into it less, but I think people are ready for something new. And so, and obviously I was with the Seattle Sounders for 9 years.
Yep.
And probably for me again, that resonated. Where after about 7 years, I thought, okay, I mean, this is great. We built a great model. Everything's going really well. We could kind of keep this chugging along. We were successful, but I always had this kind of urge to say, okay, can I create this somewhere else?
Yeah.
It'd be really cool to take these same ideas and try to apply them in another setting. That didn't necessarily have to be a different sport, but something, professionally that would really challenge myself as a practitioner. And then clearly this, but at the same time, it has to be with the right group. It has to be with the right leadership. And, and I had that urge, kind of at the same time, in 2017, I had a call from, Jeff Weltman and John Hammond, the president and GM for Orlando, who had just gotten to the organization and were kind of trying a full rebuild, to see if I was interested in taking on, a high performance role there. And so, it was very much less about me saying like, oh, I really want to go work in the NBA, and really more about, okay, this life cycle of doing what I did in Seattle. I kind of feel like it's come to a conclusion, or it'd be really nice to try something somewhere else with this opportunity with, obviously just great leadership and management that afforded me the opportunity to do that, kind of at a next level, and I think that was probably it.
Gotcha.
Kind of more than anything else. So.
Gotcha. So what would you describe as some of the biggest differences between your time with the Sounders and your time with the Magic? And I realize this is a very general question, so feel free to kind of take it in any direction that you want.
Yeah. I mean, so much was different. I mean, it was, again, because I've just explained, just kind of walked through the daily process with an NBA high performance department in terms of the size of the staff. And, now, I go to Orlando and the size of the staff is double.
Right.
And so that has impact on, the number of interactions between all the staff members now, increases exponentially because you have double the staff members. And so now you have to button up a lot of your communication. And so, there's new challenges around size of staff. I mean, the biggest challenge was going from a sport that I played myself, that I coached myself, that I felt like I knew really, really well, to a sport that I watched from a distance, but I didn't know intimately, and I wasn't sure if I would ever know it intimately, but I know that it really interested me. So to go all of a sudden work in a sport, and there, and again, there's always this discussion of how well should you know a sport before you work in it, and how much domain knowledge about the sport do you have to be successful. And I think the challenges for me is I felt like I would come in and learn the sport and know what's going on. But, I think it's interesting. I mean, I would say I clearly underestimated how long it takes to know a sport intimately at that level.
Yes.
Right. Like I go watch even, when I left after 3 years, I mean, I probably could recognize about 40% of the plays they're running out in the court, based on what was going on in practice. But, NBA is a complex game, and people that think there's not a lot of coaching are wrong. There's an incredible amount of coaching that goes on in the NBA, just an incredible amount. And, every play is the beginning of every play is scripted and practiced. And so it was getting used to that, a totally different sport. The schedule obviously was totally different. You go from really, I think the whole thought process of a high performance department from, okay, we might have a weekend between games, or at least we have 3 days in between games. And how can we assess the fatigue at the end of the game? And can we figure out what to put in place for the next 72 to 96 hours to get these athletes back where they need to be? Work with the coaching staff to create a program that the athletes get back to where they need to be from 72 to 96 hours, and then within a 4-day period in the NBA, you're either playing 2 or 3 games as you go through a season.
Yes.
And now it's less, how can we take a team from this level to this level in terms of fatigue and athlete preparedness? And okay, where's everyone at? Do we have to shut someone down? What passive therapy do we need to utilize to get athletes back up and ready to go in the next game? Maximizing recovery, because you may only have 18 hours between games.
Yeah.
You might have 3 games in 4 days. You might have 5 games in 8 days. And rather than having a 7-day period where you can plan a whole week, you may have 5 games in that same time period. So, and then the length of the season, right? Just that, I think what was so impressive to me about the very, very top NBA players is they literally, they step out and they want to do it every day.
Yeah.
They'll go score 35 points on a Tuesday, and they're going to go try to get 40 on a Wednesday.
Yep.
And then they're going to do it again. Then they're going to do it again. And then the really, really good ones, they get 3 months off in the summer, and then they go again. And I think people look at the schedule and be like, guys take games off, or it's only a 6-month season. But once you actually live the 82 games, like that, to say it's a grind is really an understatement. I think is what those guys actually do. When you add the travel on, and you add the getting back at 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning, and then coming back the next evening and maybe doing it again, it's a very different model for what athletes have to deal with than anything in the sport of soccer. Which I thought was a huge challenge, and obviously fun to take that challenge on, but also just a totally different rhythm than what I had been used to being in soccer for so many years.
Yeah, for sure. So you might have already answered this, but you're obviously a pretty methodical dude. Like, you think things through, and I'm sure you thought a lot about making this move before you actually made it. It's not like just on a whim. You said, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna switch gears and go try my hand in the NBA." So once you got there, was there anything that you didn't expect, or maybe caught you off guard?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like I said, the fact that I'd say it's probably the understanding of the sport. Like I was caught off guard by the fact that what a huge advantage it was for me within soccer to have played the sport and have to live the sport and to understand the players having been in their shoes.
Yep.
But I think until that's taken away from you, I think you underestimate, what a huge benefit that is to how you deal with athletes on a daily basis, right? Like I had been through a lot of the same things that, players in MLS had been through at different times, but I've never been a basketball player traveling, getting in at 3 a.m. and playing back-to-back games, right? I've never been in their shoes. So I think that caught me off guard. I would say that, on the negative side, that caught me off guard, right? Like on the positive side, there was actually some really interesting things. I mean, in terms of basketball versus soccer, and, anyone that works in the sport of soccer will know that there's a lot of high-level soccer players where, like, it's very important, like, do you understand the sport? Like, if you don't understand the sport, like, you can't help me.
Yep.
Unless you really get it, you can't help me. And even coaches as well. You deal with coaches that think like, you don't really get the sport. Right. And that tends to be a really typical thing in soccer where I can say, pleasantly, like, the coaches in the NBA, they were fantastic. There's not that same like arrogance of like, if you've not lived basketball, you can't help us.
Right.
Ever. And I think dealing with Coach Clifford, I had Frank Vogel the first year, who's doing okay with the Lakers right now.
Yeah.
And then Steve Clifford, the second 2 years. And there was an openness to ideas with them that I would say, like, you just didn't exist in soccer if you were seen as an outsider. Like, it was pleasantly shocking to me. It was this now I will say that, Steve Clifford has worked his whole life in basketball and been in the NBA about 20 years, but he is a huge Manchester United fan. So
that's good.
That was a huge surprise for me. That was a positive. So, a lot of our morning talks started about the state of Manchester United and then flowed into what we were going to do, for practice each day. So
I like it.
But again, I think just that the openness of the players wanted to know whether you could help them or not. And the coaches wanted to know whether you can help them or not. And there was never anyone that kind of looked down as if you couldn't help them because you didn't actually play the sport, which I think was not typical for soccer.
Yeah, no. And I think I experienced that firsthand, kind of getting into the sport. Like, I grew up playing basketball, so we're basically flip-flopped. And so, the first year, even with the Indy 11, having to be out there and, people know that this isn't your primary sport or this isn't what you grew up around. You really kind of have to earn your stripes. And I'm there with you. Like, I was used to basketball, right? And scripted plays, and this is where this person has to be. So when I get out and I watch a soccer practice and I'm like, you mean there's no like nobody kind of really knows where they're going to go? Like, it's that organic. Yeah. So that part was interesting for me. So I think, like, just take home wherever you want to land. If you're listening to this, doesn't matter, basketball, football, soccer, baseball, hockey, like, do whatever you can to learn the sport, right? It's only going to be an advantage. And some sports, like you said, Dave, like, some sports carries more weight than others. But educating yourself as to the needs and the demands of the athletes and the coaches is never a bad thing.
No. And it was interesting because I actually did we did a series of interviews, for some positions after. And so this is an interesting anecdote because I interviewed a physical therapist before I left Orlando, and we were talking about, okay, what is it like in soccer versus the NBA? And, this person had been in soccer, and I said, okay, well, what do you think it's like in the NBA? And this candidate says, well, I've been in high level soccer, and, the athletes always want to know, okay, where'd you go to school? What degrees do you have? What other athletes have you worked with? So I imagine there's some kind of validation that has to go on with NBA players, maybe even more so. And I was like, no, actually, that's not true at all. They actually don't really care where you went to school, and they don't really care what degrees they have. They are going to test you and try you on once and see if you're good.
Yep.
And see if you can help them. And then they will make a decision.
Yep.
And if it goes really well and they like you, well, then you're in.
Yes.
And if it doesn't go well, well, then you're not in. And it's almost as simple as that. It doesn't matter how many other high level athletes you've worked with. If they don't think you can help them, it's done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that decision often comes very fast. And I think, that's another reason why one of my aims, when I kind of started Orlando, there's a lot of talk about, kind of diversity of staffs. And I think that's always an interesting issue. And I think there should be a balance. But, I tried, within Orlando to hire, kind of as diverse of a staff as possible, with the knowledge that athletes respond differently to different people. And some people want a certain type of a person as a therapist or coach, and some people want a different type person as a therapist or coach. And so having some diversity on staff, is essential. Some level of diversity is essential to have different types of people and thought processes, and whether it's cognitive diversity or the normal thought about concepts of diversity. I think having different sorts of people and types of people on your staff, as long as they can still find some common ground and agree on things, is really critical. So.
It's so funny that you mentioned that, because I don't know if you had told me that or somebody else had told me that about you. Like, you had on purpose put, I don't want to say a mishmash, but like you didn't want like this homogeneous thought process, right? Where everybody does the same things, thinks the same ways. Like, you tried to, find that common ground, but have some diversity there. And you mentioned that, but then it's like, it reminds me of Joe Kim. Obviously, he was very successful. I think he spent 9 years with the Carolina Panthers. And he said, one thing that always shocks people is when people think Carolina Panthers, they think of Cam Newton, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, but I don't train Cam. He's like, one of the guys underneath me trains Cam because Cam likes him.
Yeah.
And so like, that's where you have that, like, look, man, you're not the perfect fit for everybody. As much as we'd like to think that, right? And as much as we'd like to think we could have success with everybody, like you said, sometimes people just gravitate to other people. And that's where that diversity actually helps enhance your staff.
Yeah. And I think that's the next level of where kind of this role of the high performance director is going, is how do you build out staffs that have, one, the different types of personalities, but two, they also have to have the hard skills and the skill sets as well. But you can have complementary personalities and complementary skill sets where any athlete that comes through the door, there's the right person there for them. Right. And never the occasion where an athlete walks in and just can't connect with anyone in your staff. Yeah. Right. Because ultimately you're asked by management to be able to treat, not necessarily every athlete equally, but be able to get every athlete what they need. And to do that, you often have to have, a staff that has different backgrounds and perspectives and different ways of connecting with the athletes, I guess.
Yep. I love it, man. So as we've kind of alluded to, and as you mentioned up top, you've recently taken a new role with the MLS expansion franchise in Austin. So Sounders, 9 years, Orlando Magic, 3 years. What was it about this role or opportunity that piqued your interest?
Well, definitely the sport. I think it was kind of probably about a year ago. It's funny. I went through this kind of life cycle here with Orlando, where, the first year I purposely tried not to watch any soccer, right? Soccer was a sport I grew up with. I loved and left. I kind of year one, I'm like, I'm in basketball. I'm going to love basketball. Yes. I'm going to not watch any soccer. And I did. And I enjoyed it that first year. But as I got into the second year, I started kind of having this nag. Like, that's my sport. I really miss it. And, and then I kind of got through year two in the NBA, and I just felt that tug a lot more. Like, this maybe it's my sport. I love it. I live it. And maybe, there's probably a sense of no matter how long I would have been in the NBA, I would have felt a little bit like an outsider that didn't really get it.
Yeah.
And that was not so, I don't know, sustaining to me, or was not so, I just didn't get the same enjoyment from it, So now, it's really about, okay, well, is there a situation then within soccer that fits what I would like to do, long-term professionally? And I was very, very fortunate where, a player that I had coached in Kansas City in 2008, Josh Wolf, was assistant coach with the national team and hired to become coach for Austin FC. And Josh is a coach that I think is extremely intelligent, super bright. I think he's got a great future. He also highly values this high performance influence based on his experience as a player. He was a player that, kind of fought injuries a lot through the course of his career. And I actually, worked with him when he had gone to Germany, and he played in the second Bundesliga and just got really beat up over in Germany. Came back to Kansas City after having been gone for 2 years, and we spent a lot of time together just trying to get him, healthy and going again. And then, stayed in contact over the course of the rest of his playing career, and then as an assistant coach with Columbus. So it was a unique opportunity, I think, to join a coach that I connect with really well.
Yeah.
And actually himself, and then he was hired as one of his assistants, Davey Arno, who I also coached in Kansas City for 2007 and 2008. And so to be able to now work with a group of coaches that I actually coached myself was a really unique experience. Coming into Austin, that again I think is a very forward-thinking club in a city that embraces technology and embraces analytics and embraces a lot of these the same type things that I had in Seattle. It just felt like a lot of synergy around that sort of a move from a career perspective. So. But I would say that the tipping point was definitely having the opportunity to work with Josh Wolf and a head coach that I believe in, because I do think so much of our jobs as we go through are directly affected by either, your head coach and your management. And so I had a fantastic relationship with Steve Clifford in Orlando, and he's a great head coach and did a fantastic job coaching us. But to have the opportunity to work with someone like Josh, who I'd worked with myself, and who I think is going to do a fantastic job as a coach in MLS, was just a unique opportunity.
Yeah, for sure. So this one is really interesting to me. So you were obviously super successful during your time with the Sounders, but you were there 9 years, so you probably learned at least a thing or two along the way. So what are some things that you learned during your time in Seattle that you're looking to implement when you get to Austin and you get kind of the boots on the ground and everything's up and running?
I think definitely having a staff that works together. Now, we've made a lot of our staff hires, but can't yet announce most of our hires. But it will be a staff that collaborates and works together. That, again, I think the connection with the coaching staff is critical too. And I think there was such consistency in Seattle, right? It was around, Coach, Brian Schmetzer has been head coach there he's been head coach there for, this is his third full year. Is that right? No.
Seems longer.
Fourth full year.
Feels longer.
Fourth full year. Yeah. Fifth year, fourth full year.
Yes.
But he was there from the very beginning, right? So I think consistency in staff is a really critical thing. Consistency with coaching staff and performance staff. I think that's a critical piece. My philosophy is always to have kind of small, slow, incremental gains. Allow your processes to evolve. Don't try to do too much too fast. I think a lot of times staffs and people can fail because they want to go in and they want to change everything as soon as possible. Right. And I think it's start with something basic, have it grow in complexity, let it evolve, and that can be how you're utilizing sports science, how you're integrating, your philosophy together with the head coach. I just think it's this kind of finding this organic evolution of your ideas and processes over time. It's definitely part of my nature that I think is something that was successful in Seattle. I mean, what we did from year 1 to year 9 looked radically different. And it's kind of funny because I'll look back over over the last 4 to 5 years where we had, really obviously smart guys like, Ravi Ramanani and Sean Muldoon and, Jared Phillips and, Chad Kolarsik, these, really, really, really smart people, Brett Utley. And we had consistency. There was growth, but every year we threw out about 20% and we added about 30%. And what we got grew a little bit more. And it was always important for us to pull out what we find we hadn't used as much in the previous year. And that could be, again, in our AMS platform. It could be in our morning assessments. That could be in what we did during preseason. It's just really important to constantly evaluate yourself and pull out what's not working on a yearly basis and continuing to try new things and add things. So
for sure. So
I guess that sounds basic, but
no.
It sounds...
No, and I'm hoping this next question doesn't become redundant because I feel like you've sort of answered this already, but like what sort of goals have you set for yourself or for your staff during your first year? Obviously, with the Sounders, your goal is like an MLS Cup every year. I would assume probably year one, you have different goals than winning just an MLS Cup right out of the gate.
Yeah, I think, one, currently we are in an office building in a tech park where everyone has a cubicle, right? And so really in year one, we will be doing that into moving into a new facility in about April. We'll be doing, our preseason in a nice hotel near here at a college university as well. And so there's going to be an organic growth, right? So you're really trying to build infrastructure. So year one is really about how do you build infrastructure? How do you get a way of operating? Yep. I think in the way of operating in terms of within the high performance staff, a way of operating in terms of communicating with the coaching staff, a way of operating in terms of how you're communicating with your athletes. Right now, currently, there's the club's only signed two players, right? So we still have to sign about 26 more players,
wow.
And so there's a whole lot of setting up of infrastructure that's going to happen within the next 6 months that I think we'll decide, kind of the direction that we do things, and even some of the processes, right? I think, where these players come from. Are they more South American? Are they more American? Are they players within the league? Are they players from outside the country? And again, it's how do you tweak this system, your way of doing things to kind of accommodate all those things, especially in a league that's constantly changing as well. I think I would bet there's not really very many leagues changing on a yearly basis as much as MLS is changing in terms of more expansion teams, more money,
better facilities.
Yes. Yeah. Better facilities and, younger players, less older kind of experienced players at the end of their career, more younger players who are, investments, to kind of develop and grow. So
yep.
It's hard. I guess it's hard to say I have these three goals. I'm sure that the club would very much like to make the playoffs. That would be a success if the team were to make the playoffs. But I think in terms of sustained success down the road, it's very much, structural type issues and getting a training facility that is functional and getting a staff that that is dialed in terms of the needs of the players and who those players may be. We don't even know yet. So
right. Okay, so kind of last one here. You've now worked in numerous pro sports, had different job titles. What advice would you give to a young up and coming coach who wants to follow in your footsteps?
Well, first I'll say, don't try to follow in my footsteps. Because I've said this to various younger people. If you would have asked me 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, hey, do you ever think you're going to work in the NBA? I looked at you and said, there's no way I'm ever working in the NBA. Right. And it was never my goal to work in the NBA.
Right.
So one, I think first and foremost, as a young practitioner, like I personally don't feel like it's a smart strategy to say, I want to work in this league or I want to work at this level in this sport, because things very rarely turn out the way you think they do.
Right.
I think, again, it's about looking at yourself and identifying your own talents, your own personality, I think. And then it's really going into different organizations and, maximizing your value in organizations by learning from the right people to learn from. So it's interesting because I think people should be goal oriented.
Yep.
But at the same time, they should be probably smaller, more achievable goals from a career perspective than many people hit, right?
Yes. Yeah.
rather than I think it's more about learning skills and traits than it is targeting certain jobs or certain leagues or or
Yes.
specific roles, I would say.
Yeah.
So I think we could have a whole nother podcast on kind of the specialist versus the generalist. And I think I've in the stage in my career in terms of being more in more strategic roles where I by necessity I'm more of a generalist as a leader and manager.
Yep.
But when you come into a certain sport or in our field, you typically come as a specialist, right? And so it's really important to figure out what sort of specialist that is, and then to really hammer out what the hard skills are in that particular specialization.
Yep.
Knowing that if you move and continue to evolve down the road and you become more of a management type person, that you may become more of a generalist, and those hard skills may be less relevant as you move on.
Sure.
But the starting point is where you're going to specialize and what are the hard skills necessary to specialize there.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine too, like just by nature of if you're in a high performance environment, if you're a specialist, once you are introduced into that environment, now you immediately have way more interactions with other high level specialists, right? So like if you're going to go in as a physical therapist, well, now you have to interact with NAT, with a strength coach, with a massage therapist, with a high performance director, so with a sports scientist, right? So that's where you start to pick up more of that general understanding, and that's where you would start to become more of that generalist. Once you start to understand all of the little interactions, now you understand kind of how all the pieces fit together.
For sure. Because my favorite saying within high performance sport is definitely the whole, if all you have is a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right?
Yep.
And there's so many young practitioners that start, where everything looks like a hammer, and I think the more time you spend around really smart people, the more time you spend around people from different disciplines, you realize that goals can be achieved in lots of different ways.
Yes.
And problems can be solved using, different forms, and whether that be, passive therapy, active therapy through a therapist, work with a strength coach, work with a rehab coach. There's so many different ways to do things. And I think that, the high performance department is really about coming in and recognizing what everyone else within your department can bring to the table and valuing those things.
Yep.
So
I love it. Okay. Last but not least, lightning round. So 4 fairly short questions. Your answer can be as long or short as you like. Sound good? Number 1, what's your favorite memory from your time in Orlando, basketball or life related?
I would say probably, definitely in year 2, we were a team that was not picked to make the playoffs, was not picked to even challenge for a playoff position. I think, our head coach just did probably one of the best coaching jobs I've ever seen a head coach do in any sport. Just had a tremendously successful last 25 games of the year. We gone up and beat Boston, in Boston to clinch a playoff spot, and kind of, I think there was this sense within the entire group with all the players and staff and coaching staff that, the group had done something really, really special and significant. And that kind of felt like the high point. And then playing the Toronto Raptors in the first round and actually beating Toronto in the first game of the playoffs with the team that would eventually go on and win the NBA championship that year. So, I think those two probably stood out as kind of the high point of, in terms of the sense of like whole group accomplishing something great, Obviously it starts with the players, and we had just a great group of players that worked really hard and I think bought into, what the coach and the coaching staff had done. So I would say probably that was probably the high point of my time in Orlando.
That's awesome. Okay. Number 2, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you miss seeing Chad Marshall every day?
I'd say about an 8.
Okay.
Because there's always a couple days where Chad can be a little bit grumpy, doesn't always want to be around people. But when Chad's in a good mood, then he's definitely fun to be around. Yeah.
When Chad's on, he's a 10 for sure.
Oh yeah.
Don't worry. I got a couple of those days too in the off season, so I know what that's like.
Yeah. When Chad was in his 30s and his hips got really sore the day after games, and he had to play on that artificial grass and CenturyLink, he didn't always show up in the best moods, but overall he was a fantastic personality and human to deal with.
Yes, agreed. Okay, number 3, What was your first priority when you got to Austin? What was like the first thing you wanted to get done?
Well, again, it's interesting because we are still very much in kind of a startup feel type mode. But I think, again, just establish connection with the coaches and really sit down with the head coach and Josh Wolf and really figure out his ideas and his concepts and where he wants to take things and really how he values high performance. I mean, he's a guy that I don't know if you've had Steve Tajan on.
Not yet. He's podcast. On my list. I had Darcy on. Okay. I got to get Steve on now.
All right. Yes. I mean, Josh is coming from a place, the U.S. national team, where he's had Steve Tajan and Darcy together. He obviously was with Steve Tajan for years in Columbus, and those. If you work with Steve Tajan or Darcy, then you very much highly value what a high performance department can bring. Mm-hmm. So, really, just trying to get his perspectives on that, having worked with two great guys like that, which is it's big shoes to fill because those are super talented practitioners. So
yes, for sure. Okay, last but not least. What's next for Dave Tenney?
I think it's just, again, trying to create something sustainable. I mean, there's nothing necessarily short term in terms of, that I got to tick this box. It's just really getting the staff in here. It's trying to get a group that collaborates and works together and enjoys each other and wants to do something special. And it's really, it's definitely less about me, and it's really trying to create a group that wants to kind of work and learn together, and how my role to facilitate that, I think is kind of my next step. So, it's funny where, those who followed Seattle will follow the legend of, Ravi Ramaneni there. And he would always have the saying of like, before you drive the Ferrari, you got to build the road. Like that was Ravi's favorite saying as organizations try to use data analytics, AMS platforms, GPS, whatever, you really have to know how to package things and store things before you can analyze and make decisions. And from this standpoint, it's more organizational. It's just, how do you build the road for this department that's going to come in and hopefully, perform at a high level. So,
man, so now I got to put you on the spot. You mentioned Ravi. Like, when can we expect the Austin FC Sports Science Conference? Is that coming in 2021?
Well, we're going to have to deal with the whole COVID situation before we worry about any conferences. So,
that's true. That's true.
I mean, it's obviously been a difficult space because I think some of the conferences have been some of our best experiences in terms of how we grow and evolve. And the virtual stuff has been great. And I know Sean and Ravi had tremendous conferences. The Sounders Sports Science and the Sounders Analytics conferences were. I mean, I definitely watched and attended every one, and they've done great jobs with that. But I'll also say I'm a little bit tired of the virtual conferences too, because there is something about just the human interaction that I think we're all missing where it is right now with COVID. So it'd be great. I mean, down the road, it'd be great to have a conference in Austin and start that up here. But we've got a whole pandemic I think we've got to deal with before we start answering those questions. So.
Yeah, I'm sure there was a time when we were all like, man, I'm so tired of just going to conferences. And now, like I was thinking about this before the show, it's like, kind of be nice to just go to a conference and hang out and like have breakfast or lunch or beers with somebody and just hang out and be a normal human again,
Yeah. And see your guys like Patrick Ward. I mean, that's been, I'm not seeing someone like, Patrick or, guys like that you kind of see on the circuit of the different conferences that you get to connect with. It's just, I mean, we'll get back there, but it's,
absolutely,
it's sad. Yeah,
it is. Well, not to end on a dour note like that, but Dave, I mean, obviously, man, it's always great catching up with you. I think some really phenomenal insight today. Where can my listeners find out more about you?
Just really Instagram and Twitter. I would say those are the only main things. I mean, I think I'm at Dave Tenney on both Twitter and Instagram. So I don't say that I don't share a ton anymore, just out of being busy doing other things. But you can definitely catch up with me there and shoot me a note there if there's anything you'd like to touch base on. So
I love it. Well, Dave, man, thanks again for coming on, buddy. This was really great.
Thank you. And again, thanks for having me. It's I've been obviously a big fan and happy to hear some of the guys you've had on. And I heard Sean Muldoon a couple weeks ago.
Man.
So it's great having him on. And again, it's an honor to be one of the 3-timers.
Yes.
I don't know if there's a special term for that. But
that's right. I don't know, but I'm going to have to do that going forward. All right, my friend, that does it for this week's show with Dave Tenney. Really hope you enjoyed it. He is such an amazing guy. Love catching up with him. As he alluded to, one of the only 3-timers on the show. So obviously, enjoy chatting with him and just enjoy catching up and learning more about what he's got going on and what he's got going through his head, man. Just every single time we talk, there's an amazing discussion. So if you enjoyed this episode, do me a favor, subscribe to the show. Doesn't matter where you consume podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, Spotify, Amazon. If you consume podcasts there, you can probably find the Physical Preparation Podcast there. So if you're not already, subscribe. If you are already subscribed, thank you. Do me one more favor. Go into iTunes, give us a rating and a review. Ratings and reviews are the most surefire way to make sure more people, more young trainers, coaches, physical therapists, rehab professionals find out about the show. They listen to these awesome guests that we have on and just make our entire profession a little bit better. So, my friend, as always, thank you so much for your support. Love and appreciate you. And we'll be back soon with our next episode. Take care.